Lying on the center of the East Sea, Vietnam enjoyed great opportunities for trade expansion and socio-economic development on the one hand, but also faces big challenges in the cause of national maritime sovereignty protection. From 1834 to 1836, King Minh Mang sent such generals as Phạm Phu Si, Phạm Văn Nguyên and Phạm Hữu Nhất to Hoàng Sa for measurement of each and every island, surveying, mapping and installing steles and altars. King Thiệu Trị himself approved the Ministry of Public Works annual action plan of the Hoàng Sa flotilla. King Tự Đức bestowed the members of the Hoàng Sa flotillas who died in action the title of Heroic Soldier of Trường Sa. I am the descendant of the fifth generation of flotilla supervisor Phạm Hữu Nhất, a member of the Phạm Văn family in An Vinh commune. Our ancestors used to reside in An Vinh, Tiên Kỳ, Quảng Ngãi province. Some ancestors in our Phạm family, such as Mr. Phạm Quang Anh, Phạm Văn Nguyên, Phạm Văn Xanh, Mr. Võ Văn Khiết and Đặng Văn Xiên in Tây Village, An Vinh commune, and some other helmsmen were dispatched to Hoàng Sa to measure sea route and search for rare and precious sea products to pay tribute to the emperors. We are very grateful and proud that our ancestors had devoted great service in land claiming and defending our maritime border and national sovereignty at sea.
Chúng tôi con cháu mãi mãi ghi ơn tất cả những cái công lao to tát đó.
Precious relics of Hoàng Sa flotilla are now stored in worship places in Lý Sơn Island such as Am Linh Pagoda, where the wandering soul of martyrs of Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa flotillas are worshipped and commemorated. Vestiges of Hoàng Sa flotilla in church of Trường Sa are also found at the Vo family's ancestral altar, the tomb of Võ Văn Khiết, the Đặng family's altar worshipping Đặng Văn Siêu, the altar and tomb of Captain Phạm Quang Anh, commander of Hoàng Sa flotilla, who was ordained as first great saint. Only luck could help the Marines of Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa return home after harsh voyages under the court's order. Hence, families of those men conducted offering ceremonies before their departure. Joss papermen on the paper boats were floated on the water to sort off all the bad lucks for the real ones. That ritual reflects the desire to survive, to serve their motherlands more. Those heroic seamen of Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa rarely returned, but their flesh and bones became one with the waters and waves, staying forever with this nation and being commemorated for endless generations of the country. Oh, the land of Viet under this southern sky has gone through so much hardship. We remember those who died then, knowing that birth is just a short visit and death means a real return. But many sailed off and few returned. They only lost their bodies and their souls ever live. It is so hurtful when they fell down for the fatherland, showing their great loyalty and the courage of man, daring to travel into the unknown, daring to withstand the rains and winds, taking the charge of protecting the boundaries at those far-off places, determined to keep the waters of Hoàng Sa amidst the vast sea without knowing when to be back. The system of legal and historical materials linked to the many vestiges and cultural festivals relating to Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa in Lý Sơn Island, the graves of Hoàng Sa flotilla's men and their commemorative ceremonies are evidence of the Vietnamese aspirations and strive to conquest the East Sea and exercise sovereignty over the archipelagos of Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa. Vietnam confirmed its sovereignty over those two archipelagos not only by historical documents but also by the maps drawn during these times, including the map of the Annam Empire, Annam Đại Quốc Họa Đồ, published in 1838, the complete map of the unified Đại Nam, drawn and printed at the same time under King Minh Mạng order, incorporating the names of all the territorial areas in the country and the areas of Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa in Chinese scripts. The map collections was widely recognized and published in the West. The Vietnamese feudal state was aware of educating the young generation on protection of sovereignty over Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos. The children's textbook Khải Đồng Thuyết Ước, printed in the year of the snake of the Tự Đức era 1881, has a map named the State Map, Bản Quốc Địa Đồ, putting Hoàng Sa under Vietnam's sovereignty. By exploring and exploiting the natural resources of Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa, the Nguyễn Lốt and their royal courts later had gradually exercised de facto and de jure state managerial functions over the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos. By exercising sovereignty here, the Vietnamese feudal state had gained the ownership of these territories when they were terra nullius, or not belonging to the territory or administrative system of any other country. The two archipelagos have become an inseparable part of the Vietnamese territory from unclaimed islands. Vietnam's sovereignty over the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos were also confirmed through Western documents such as books, magazines, maps, diaries, maritime guidebooks, and missionary books. These texts represent the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos as a long stretch of sand off the central coast of Vietnam, similar to illustrations in ancient Vietnamese texts and maps of the same period. The Bulletin de l'École française d'Extrême Oriente, tome 36 in 1936, records the Batavia diary of the La Compagnie des Indes Néerlandaises et l'Indochine, India Holland Company in Indochina, about the East India Company's shipping incidents in the Hoàng Sa archipelagos, then known as Pressel, in Cochinchina under the rule of Lord Nguyễn Phước Nguyên during the 1931-1936 period as follows. The party left on the 20th of July from the Bay of Touraine. The ships found themselves separated from each other on the 21st by storms. The Vin Huizan reached Formosa on August the 2nd and Chagan the 10th, but the Grotebroek was wrecked near the island of Brassel at 17° latitude north. The first-class merchant John Sockmore lost his life with 8 crewmen. Cargo, which amounted to 153,690 florins. He was lost with the ship for a value of 70,695 florins, with the rest safely and secretly stowed away on an island. Captain Huich Jansen, taking 12 men, embarked for and reached for the Annam coast. Captain Jansen made report on the sinking of the Grotebroek in the Parasols and the confiscation of 23,580 roe by the Cochinchina authorities. 2 years later, under the reign of the Lord Superior Nguyễn Phước Lan, 1635-1648, on March the 6th, 1636, 2 other Dutch vessels reached Da Nang. Merchant Abraham de Jacker set forward to 54 Hoi An to meet the Governor-General, then proceeded to En1 to meet the Lord Superior to ask for permission to trade, set up trading posts, and requisitions of the 23,580 confiscated roe 2 years later. To make up for their loss, the Lord Superior gave the Dutch the right to free trade in the country, exempted them from anchorage fees and the usual presents. For that reason, since 1836, a Dutch trading post was established in Hoi An, then known as 54, headed by Abraham de Jacker. Father Tartre wrote in a letter to his Father Superior in 1701, printed in the collection of interesting letters on Asia, Africa and America, Volume 3, 1843 edition provided some additional note about the geography and history of the parasol as follows. The ship weighed its anchor, enjoying favorable winds and as such reaching the west end of the parasols. Parasol is an archipelago belonging to the En1 kingdom. It is a gigantic stretch of shoals running for hundreds of miles where many ships wrecked. It runs along the coast of Cochinchina or Dang Chong in local vernacular. Another title published in London in 1806 by John Barrow, an envoy of the British mission in China, tells in A Voyage to Cochinchina in the years 1792-1793 of a trip to Vietnam in 1793, detailing the times of vessels used by the people of Cochinchina to travel to Hoàng Sa archipelago to collect swallow nests. Jean-Baptiste Cheniot took the Vietnamese name of Nguyễn Văn Thắng, married a Vietnamese wife, and spent some time helping King Gia Long fight the Tây Sơn movement. Before leaving Vietnam for France, Cheniot was requested by the then French Foreign Minister, the Duke of Richelieu, to report on the situation in Vietnam. Notice sur la Cochinchine report on Cochinchina is the report on Vietnam during the beginning of the Nguyen dynasty, written by Jean-Baptiste Cheniot in May 1820 before he left Vietnam for France after 25 years of serving King Gia Long. The report was printed in the Bulletin des Amis du Vieux Huế, Bulletin of Old Friends of Huế, in 1923. In its opening, Cheniot described the geography of Vietnam as follows. Cochinchina, whose sovereign now bears the title of emperor, include Cochinchina's proper, Tonkin, some habited islands not far from the coast and parasol composed of islets, reefs, and uninhabited rocks. It was only in 1816 that the present emperor took possession of this archipelago. The establishment of sovereignty of Vietnam over the Hoàng Sa archipelagos by King Gia Long through a flag planting ceremony in 1816 was recorded by Monsignor Jean-Louis Tabert, Vicar Apostolic of Cochinchina and King Gia Long's interpreter in the Geography of Cochinchina, published in 1837, as follows. The parasol or parasols is a labyrinth of small islands, rocks, and sandbanks which appears to extend up to the 11th degree of north latitude. In the 107th parallel of longitude from Paris, although this kind of archipelago presents nothing but rocks and great depths which promises more inconveniences than advantages, King Gia Long thought he had increased his dominions by this sorry addition. In 1816, he went with solemnities to plant his flag and take formal possession of these rocks, which it is not likely anybody will dispute with him. Also on King Zhalong's occupation of the Huangsha and Cheongsha archipelagos, the war history and description of all the peoples, religions, customs and practices, Japan, Indochina, Ceylon, by Dubois de Gensigny, published in 1850, page 555, records as follows. We will only observe that for over 34 years, the parasols appointed by the Annamese Katvang or Huangsha, Yellow Land, a real labyrinth of small islands of rocks and sandbars just dreaded by navigators, was not occupied Cochin. We do not know if they have established a place, but it is certain that Emperor Zhalong wanted to add that strange jewel to his crown, because he judged it expedient to take possession in person, and it was in the year 1816 that Solomon bears the flag Cochin. The collection of duties by the Nguyen dynasty from foreign vessels passing by the Huangsha archipelago were recorded by Gustave in the Journal of the Geographical Society of London in 1849 as follows. We should not mention here the parasols Katvang, which approach 15-20 leagues to the coast of Annam and extend between 15 degrees 17 degrees north latitude and 111 degrees 113 east longitude, if the king of Cochin did not claim these as his property and many eyes and reefs so dangerous to navigators. The Annam government, perceiving the advantages which it might derive if a toll was raised, keep the revenue cutters and its small garrisons on the spot to collect the duty on all visitors and to ensure protection to its own fishermen. The Compendio di Geografia, Compendium of Geography by Adriano Balbi, written in Italian, at page 548 in the 1854 edition by Livorno Publishing House, and page 643 in the 1864 edition by the Milano Publishing House, described the geography of the Annam Kingdom, Vietnam today. Belonging also to this empire is the archipelago of Parasol, the group of the pirates, and the group of Pulo Condao Island of today. Also in these books, the sections on Chinese geography do not make any mention of the Huangsha or Cheongsha archipelagos. In Tableau de la Cuisine, published in 1862, Eugène Cottenberg and Léon de Rosny placed the parasol of Katvang in the island groups belonging to Vietnam. The recognition of Huangsha and Cheongsha archipelagos as belonging to the Annam Kingdom is not only described in Western texts, but also drawn on advanced maps made from the 16th century by European countries and countries in the Americas. In one of his research, researcher M.G. Dumoutier talked about a 24-piece set of maps of Vietnam drawn at the end of the 15th century, of which the 19th piece clearly display a long sand strip 500 to 600 nautical miles long named by Katvang, Golden Sand, off the coast of Quảng Ngãi province. In many ancient maps from the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries of missionaries, seafarers from Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, the Huangsha and Cheongsha archipelagos have been depicted as a continuous strip in the shape of a bun sail off the coast of the central region of Vietnam, with many small dots representing islands, sandbanks with the words Île de Prassel. Prassel Archipelago. A particular note is Sinensis Oceanus East Sea map of the Dutch Van Landgren brothers, printed in 1595, and the India Orientalis map of East India by Mercator, printed in 1606 in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. In the area corresponding to today's coast of Da Nang is the words Costa de Prasel, meaning coast of Prasel. In 1838, Monsignor Tabert published in his Latin-Vietnamese dictionary Dictionarium Anamitico Latinum, which was a very detailed translation of the Vietnamese language to Latin. The dictionary was attached with a map called Tabula Geographica Imperii Anamitici, the map of the Annam Empire, illustrating a section of the Hoàng Sa archipelago off the coast of Annam coastal islands, labeling them Parasols Sâu Cát Vàng. This particular map is proof of the deep and accurate understanding of Westerners of the relationship between the Hoàng Sa archipelago and the country of Đại Việt from 16th to the early 19th century, which Tabert calls country of Great Annam. Paracel is the name given to the Golden Sand Island in the East Sea of Vietnam by Westerners, also known as Hoàng Sa, with the word Sêu in Sêu Paracel on the map in Latin meaning, while Hoàng Sa is Old Vietnamese for gold sands. This map is proof that Westerners obviously confirmed that Hoàng Sa belonged to Vietnam rather than belonging to China, which called the archipelago Sisha. Moreover, many German and Dutch archive centers currently house geographical books, dictionaries, maps, illustrating Hoàng Sa, Trường Sa as a continuous strip in the shape of a dagger hilt. Many of these recognize the two archipelagos as belonging to the Annam Kingdom. The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Room recently presented to Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng a copy of a map of Tonkin and Cochinchina drawn in 1695. This is one of 10 atlases currently preserved in the Netherlands, drawn by the East India Company during the 17th, 18th centuries, including descriptions of Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa as belonging to the Kingdom of Annam. This once again reaffirmed that the world is always at the side of Vietnam and pays attention to the righteous struggle to regain sovereignty in these two archipelagos. Western documents relating to the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelago during the past 2 centuries is completely in keeping with the contents of recorded legal documents, history books, maps of Vietnam at the time, and are precious sources of reference to strengthen Vietnam's legal arguments for sovereignty over the two Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos. It should also be underlined that in this period, foreign texts do not mention the slightest notion of sovereignty or even claims by China to the two archipelagos. What should be noted here is that some Chinese documents even support Vietnam's sovereignty over the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos. For 2 centuries, Vietnam has conducted many activities within Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos. Annual 6-month-long trips by the Hoàng Sa flotillas never met with any objection from China. Chinese geographical maps show Chinese territory ending at Hainan Island. Other documents even give proof of Chinese recognitions of Vietnamese sovereignty over the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa, such as overseas memoirs by Thích Đại San, the abbot of a Buddhist pagoda in Quang Tung province. The text is the memoir of his time in Thuận Quang region of the country of Đại Việt, Vietnam today, in 1695, before returning to China in 1697. The title of the text shows that this is a story about the author's trip to Đại Việt. The original manuscript was translated into Vietnamese in 1963 at Huế University. An excerpt from Volume 3, after talking about maritime issues and the role of wind, talked about the activities of Hoàng Sa flotillas formed by the Nguyễn Lord as follows. The previous king, here is the Nguyễn Lord, annually sent ships around sandbanks to collect gold, silver. In the fall, following the east wind, ships can travel hundreds of miles when there is a strong wind. In 1759, when vessels of the Hoàng Sa flotillas were washed ashore onto Hainan Islands, they were received by the Chinese authorities and provided the necessary equipment to return to Vietnam. Another Chinese text published in 1842 called Hai Lục, Sea Journey Records by Dương Bình Nam, recorded first-hand experience of a Chinese sailor named Ta Thanh Cao, wrote, Vạn Lý Trường Sa is a stretch of land in the middle of the sea that is several thousand miles long, is a wall protecting Annam's or Annam's hedge. Chu Sa's legal and historical documents proving Vietnam's sovereignty over the Hoàng Sa Trường Sa archipelagos, we can consider sovereignty over the Paracel and Spratly Islands by Monique Chemelier-Jean-Tro, published in March 1996. The book is a serious and independent scientific research project. Monique Chemelier-Jean-Tro is a professor emeritus of public law and political science at the University of Paris 7th, Denis Diderot, and is former president of the French Democratic Lawyers Association. In her book, Monique Chemelier-Jean-Tro listed many historical and legal documents affirming Vietnam's sovereignty over the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos. We were fortunate enough to have the chance to meet and talk with the professor in Hanoi in the early days of 2011 while reenacting these historical events.
Alors, chaque fois que je viens au Vietnam, je constate
Every time I came to Vietnam, I always found and regretted that the issue of Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa, which I have studied for the past 13 years, have not been resolved. When I initially studied this matter under the international law perspective, I started with the historical entitlement of the claimant countries over these islands. I found out that Vietnam inherited the historical entitlement established since the 17th century, since from that time there had already been documents which I could not read directly as they were in either Vietnamese or Chinese. Later on, I read them in their French translation. These documents confirm that from the 17th century to the 19th century AD, the Vietnamese kings had already confirmed Vietnam's sovereignty over the two archipelagos. What formed the legal foundation were that the Annamite kings not only stayed as saying, "This is our islands," but also conducted managerial activities. This was indeed a component of the principle of international law, from a terra nullius. In the case of these two archipelagos, there was one country that occupied these territories, that is, when this country exercised real action to control and manage these territories. From the document I've got in hand, I would certainly reiterate that as to a foreigner like myself, the study of this issue must be via translated documents. But from what accessible to me today, I could see that the Annamite kings had earned the historical entitlement over these two archipelagos. They had dispatched two seagoing companies to the two archipelagos in good seasons to conduct accurate instructions like planting trees or measuring the islands, etc. From these facts, I could be concluded that since those times, the Annamite kings had already enjoyed a good historical entitlement over the two archipelagos, which we found no other countries in the region could.
Parce qu'ils ont envoyé des compagnies de navigation, ils avaient créé 2 compagnies de navigation qu'ils envoyaient dans les archipels à la saison propice. Et ces compagnies avaient des ordres très précis, par exemple de planter des arbres, par exemple de faire le cadastre des îles, le plan exact. Et on avait donc, et de ramener des richesses naturellement, et on a donc par là des éléments qui permettent de conclure que pour cette époque-là, il y a eu un titre juridique des empereurs du Vietnam qu'on ne trouve pas l'équivalent pour les autres pays concurrents dans la région.
At the recent second session of the 13th National Assembly of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam on November the 25th, 2011, the Prime Minister of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam Nguyễn Tấn Dũng affirmed,
khẳng định có đủ căn cứ về
Vietnam has full legal and historical evidences to confirm that Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos belong to Vietnam's sovereignty. We have exercised effective occupation at least from the 17th century when these two archipelagos did not belong to any country. We have continuously and peacefully exercised effective ownership.
đã làm chủ trên thực tế và liên tục hòa bình.
Thus, by effectively carrying out exploitation and management of the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos through the Hoàng Sa and Bắc Hải flotillas, the state of Vietnam has affirmed Vietnam's indisputable sovereignty over the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos. At least from the 17th century, the Hoàng Sa and Trường Sa archipelagos have become a sacred part of the territory of the people of Vietnam.
Hoàng Sa ngàn bão tố phong ba, ta vượt qua lướt sóng con tàu mang tín hiệu trong đất liền, mắt em nhìn theo con tàu đi xa mãi, giữa nơi biển khơi đang nở rộ ngàn bông hoa san hô, cánh hoa đỏ thắm bao hy vọng anh gửi về tặng em. Ơi ánh mắt em yêu như biển xanh, như trời xanh trong nắng mới, nhớ cả dáng hình em mùa gặt nặng đôi vai, sóng dù mối tình đời thủy thủ càng thêm vui. Đây con tàu xa khơi, đây con tàu xa